Throughout the years, there's been a lot of content creators that have done League of Legends patch rundowns. And as an avid ARAM fan, I was looking for a content creator who does patch rundowns, but talks specifically about the buffs and nerfs to the game, and how it will impact the Howling Abyss map rather than Summoner's Rift map. But sadly, there was no content out there doing an ARAM patch notes rundown. I was disappointed, and I thought to myself, hey, I've played thousands of ARAM games, I also host ARAM tournaments, so why don't I just make an ARAM patch notes rundown? So here it is, my very first ARAM patch notes rundown starting on patch 25.05. So for every single champion, I'll put on the bottom right their win rates based off of the u.gg ARAM data, and I'll also put the buffs and nerfs, if a champion has them, from the data that I get from the wiki.leagueoflegends.com website. So those are the screenshots from there. Just giving credit, I'll make sure to send those links down in the description and set them up for you if you want to check them out yourselves, or maybe something got outdated. But now let's talk about patch 25.05, the ARAM buffs and nerfs. I want to do something a little weird and unusual and talk about the Unflinching rune first, because I'm going to be addressing Unflinching on every single champion, because this is, in my opinion, a huge buff for the Howling Abyss. Unflinching rune gives you bonus resistance once you get CC'd. And in ARAM, I'm sure all of us have been CC'd many times before for long periods of duration. So the fact that you get a bunch of more bonus magic resist and armor just for essentially existing in ARAM is going to be a massive buff. I think Unflinching will be something that every single tank, potentially even everyone in general, should take Unflinching, because just the base, the raw armor and magic resist you're going to get from this will be massive. But if you stack this on top of Aftershock, if you're a tank, it's going to become even more stronger. You're going to get even more resistance. If you then combine the Unflinching, the Aftershock, and Jack-Show with this, you're going to be an absolutely tanky person on the Howling Abyss. But there is one thing to note about this. Anytime that armor and magic resist gets buffed, that's an indirect buff to true damage champions. Because true damage, obviously, shreds armor and magic resist. So I wouldn't be surprised if Vayne's going to be really strong now. I wouldn't be surprised if Camille is kind of strong and things like that. So I think that Unflinching is a must-take, and the armor and magic resist you get from this, Aftershock, and Jack-Show will be incredibly strong. However, I think that will also make true damage dealers really strong as well. But I wanted to start off with this because we are going to mention this quite a bit on certain champions. Now let's scroll down to the ARAM section. We'll talk about the ARAM buffs, then we'll go through the individual things and discuss the buffs to each champion as a whole. So let's scroll down to the actual ARAM buffs and nerfs. Lots of stuff for Arena. Okay, Soraka, Q heal. So she gets an AP ratio increase. She also gets about 15 damage per level. Yep, on her Q heal. And then 10% maximum health to 5% maximum health. Healing done 100 to 105. Okay, so the healing is going to be great for this because that means you're sacrificing less healing since you're giving away more healing. You'll also lose less health whenever you heal. And then also, this should force people to build AP. I think Warmog Soraka is kind of a bit of a trap because stacking up the total amount of 2500 HP for Warmogs, it just feels like it takes way too long. So I think this is really, really good for Soraka. And if people build AP, then I think Soraka could potentially be a really, really strong support. If people try to build her tank and go Warmogs, I think she's going to remain the same. But I think these are good buffs for AP/normal healing Soraka. We also have a Dark Harvest buff, so 5 damage compared to the 4. That'll feel nice. Dark Harvest is a pretty popular rune, but I don't feel like it's as necessary. I think some people will benefit from this. And then we have the nerfs. The Sett cooldown W has been increased to 2 seconds starting at level 12. 13.5. So it increasingly gets more and more nerfed as you level up, which is fine. Sett is still going to be good with his W. You're still probably going to max W. Additional regen every 5% missing health is reduced regen every 10% missing health, so he'll regen slower. I think this is fine. I still think Sett will be very dominant in it. Sett W is just basically impossible to dodge. And then once you get Bloodthorn, what's that item called? I can't remember that item. I'll throw it up on this screen. But once you get that item, I think Sett will still be just fine. Now let's go through the actual patch notes. Now again, I'm talking about this from an ARAM perspective, so keep that in mind. We'll start with Ambessa. So they're going to nerf her E, her bonus to AD. Ambessa's kind of struggling on the Howling Abyss a bit. I think you will kind of feel this nerf, especially because it's 60 bonus 80 and it's not this. So it's not going to be scaling. I just feel like Ambessa only does well into fairly tanky teams and doesn't do super well into a good variety of comp. What I mean by a good variety is if you have a tank, you have mage, a marksman. Ambessa doesn't do too well. I feel like you need a lot of tanks for her to work in Howling Abyss, or a lot of squishy champions for her to work in Howling Abyss. I don't think this is going to help Ambessa, obviously, because it's a nerf. I think Ambessa will still remain pretty weak. I'm also going to zoom in a bit more. This is super zoomed out. There we go. That's a bit better. So I think Ambessa will still remain fairly weak. She's kind of struggling right now on Howling Abyss. But let's talk about Aphelios. Now, attack speed ratio. So this might change the build for Aphelios. Aphelios' current build, you're not going to really feel this. However, I think if you potentially go to a build such as like a Jinx build, that would be good. Because what attack speed ratio does is attack speed ratio works well if you're building attack speed. All of Aphelios' current build, it doesn't have much attack speed in the build. So I think that if you did do a Jinx style type of build, Aphelios will be really strong. Aphelios is also hyper carry, and hyper carries want to get to late game. Howling Abyss, you basically are guaranteed to get to late game because of how fast paced the entire game is. I think Aphelios will be an incredibly strong marksman for Howling Abyss this patch. Next we have Ashe with a nerf. Our damage decreased, so it's decreased by 50 for each level. You don't really pick Ashe for her ultimate damage, you pick her for her utility. Ashe is still going to be incredibly strong, I believe. However, again, this is why I wanted to start off with Unflinching. Unflinching is going to hard counter Ashe. How hard counter will it be? I'm not sure. We're going to have to wait and see. I think Unflinching will be a necessity if you're against Ashe in Summoner's Rift, where you can see the champions. I still think Unflinching will be good, even if you're not against Ashe. So I don't think this will nerf Ashe too difficult or too much. I still think Ashe will have an easy time playing against them, but Ashe might have a bit of difficulty if everyone takes Unflinching. Now we do need to address one thing. Anytime an ult is buffed or nerfed, that is indirect buff or nerf to Sylas. Sylas will feel this because Sylas does build damage. Ashe typically builds more attack speed, so she doesn't really feel this. But this is an indirect nerf to Sylas. Again, you pick Ashe R for the utility, not for the damage. Then we have Aurora with a nerf. Aurora is not very strong in ARAM. She just feels weak, but let's take a look at these nerfs. So damage is nerfed by, it's just an AP rate, AP percentage nerf. Okay, so yeah, you'll definitely feel that later into the game probably. And ultimate border collision slow 75% to 50%. That's actually pretty decent. So you're basically nerfing all of her CC in her kit. Her E is nerfed damage-wise, and then you you reduce the slow duration of her ultimate. I still think her ult is going to be really good, and I think Aurora will be fine. She probably will lose a little bit of her win rate. I don't think she'll be the strongest mage. I think people that only know how to pilot Aurora properly will probably do well. I wouldn't say pick Aurora in this case, because these nerfs, I think, are probably going to be bigger than people think in the Howling Abyss. Cho'Gath. So Cho'Gath received these nerfs because of a speed Gath build. People were building a lot of movement speed on Summoner's Rift. However, with Cho'Gath, you typically still build tank on Howling Abyss. So let's take a look at these nerfs. So you have 80, 145, 210. So it's nerfed about 20 points as you max it completely. Still same AP. You have the same AP percentage for the W. Slightly nerfed on 20 damage as you get to late game on it, as you max it. Now this is the interesting part. This is what I think is going to make Cho'Gath tank even better. You have all of this maximum health increased. So it was originally 3% plus per stack, 0.5% per stack for target's maximum health. Now it's been upgraded to 3.5 once it's fully maxed. So you get extra damage. And here's why this is important. The reason why this is important is I think Cho'Gath will be incredibly tanky because he can stack the infinite health. He could also maybe take Unflinching, potentially Aftershock and Jackshow to stack the armor and magic resist. So he's going to have a lot of health with his ult. He's going to have a lot of resistance from all the runes, plus Jackshow if he builds it. But here's the biggest part. He deals true damage. Cho'Gath ult deals true damage. So the people that are going to be stacking Aftershock, Unflinching, Jackshow, and having all those resistance, Cho'Gath will shred them. But if you, on top of that, put this into perspective, he's going to shred tanks this patch. I guarantee it. On Howling Abyss, Cho'Gath is already really strong going tank, but with this, he's going to absolutely destroy front lines, but specifically tanks with his true damage, and he's just going to out-tank them, just because he just naturally will with this patch. I think Cho'Gath will be the best tank this patch in the game on Howling Abyss. And if not, he's going to be one of the best. But I think he genuinely will be the best tank on Howling Abyss this patch. Elise, Q nerf and a Q spider form nerf. Human Q and spider form Q. So let's see the nerfs real quick. So 4% of target's health, 3% per AP, to 4% target. Wait, what did they nerf? Oh, the base damage. So 20 damage nerf whenever you level it up. And is this the same? Wait, what did they nerf here? What am I missing? Oh, they nerfed the early game. Okay. Yeah, so I think Elise is one of the worst champions in Howling Abyss currently. These nerfs are definitely going to make her worse. I would not suggest ever picking Elise again in Howling Abyss. She is already struggling. Unless you're planning on ending the game in level 5, then I wouldn't pick her. I think she's going to be atrocious this patch. She's already pretty bad. So that's too bad, because Elise is kind of fun to play. Even with the ARAM buffs, I still think she's fun, but I think she's going to be unfun because of how weak she'll be. K'Sante. So passive nerf 20 to 12. That's pretty massive. And then W Pathmaker 10 to 100% based on channel duration to 10 to 80%. Okay, so he's not going to deal as much damage, obviously, based off these nerfs. He's going to have the resistances of the Aftershock bonus, because he could proc Aftershock if he wanted to. I still think Grasp of the Undying is way better on him. You will definitely feel these nerfs. K'Sante struggles on Howling Abyss. These nerfs will not help him. But on top of this, if he's ever against someone like Garen, because he loses health whenever he ults, Garen's can eventually go to one-shot him with true damage. You have Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is going to one-shot K'Sante once K'Sante ults with Cho'Gath's true damage. I think K'Sante is going to be a really bad tank. Would not recommend picking K'Sante this patch on Howling Abyss. Dr. Mundo gets a base health increased. I mean, yeah, that's going to feel good. I think Dr. Mundo is like the most average tank in Howling Abyss. I don't think he's good. I don't think he's bad. I think he's just kind of neutral. He just kind of exists. If you enjoy Mundo, I think you'll enjoy this buff. You're probably not going to feel it too much in Howling Abyss because base health isn't that noticeable compared to Summoner's Rift, where level 1 might take a little longer, in my opinion. Poppy, AD growth increased, passive shield formula reworked, and E damage decreased. So this is a rework, and I believe that they are doing this because they wanted to nerf support but buffer overall. I think this even says here, Poppy lost quite a bit in top lane. Yeah, her jungle is a bit weak, and her support is quite strong. Okay, so let's talk about this. HP growth, she'll be slightly tankier early game. Iron Ambassador, so 13, 15.5, 18% max HP level 173. Why 7? Why would they make it 7? That's such an unusual number. You'd think that you would do it for every ult time. 11 to 20% max HP based on level. Okay, so Poppy is going to hit these late game levels quickly in Howling Abyss, so she'll be extra tanky. The thing to really note, though, is the E damage buffs. So you have 140, 180, 100, 220, and then you have 80, 120. So this is the exact same, except, again, you get to later into the game. Oh, wait, no. I'm incorrect. Wait. Okay, they're nerfing her early game damage. I see. So they're nerfing her E because they don't want her to do well as support, but they're making it so she scales harder because of the bonus AD. Okay, I see. I misread that. So yeah, they're nerfing her base damage, but she scales harder with AD. So I think potentially a Poppy Bruiser build would be very, very strong. The biggest flaw with Poppy in Howling Abyss is there's not very many walls that you can play around. And landing this extra pin and getting this extra damage might be more difficult than you can imagine. But if you're good at Poppy and you're comfortable knowing the range and distance, I think Poppy will be a really solid tank. Poppy will always be successful if she tries to counter comps. And here's a bit of a tip if you're playing Poppy and ARAM. If you look at the champions you rerolled and have on your team, if you have no mobility, chances are the enemy team is going to likely have mobility. So I think Poppy will be a great counter pick. And I think overall she'll be decent to play. And I think also she will be a great bruiser with these changes. She will be tanky enough to sustain some damage, but also deal a decent bit of damage because of the bonus AD scaling now. We shall see. I think Poppy should be a pick, though, if you get the opportunity and you're comfortable with her. Seraphine, Q maximum damage increased. Maximum champion bonus damage 60 to 75%. Even though Seraphine is heavily nerfed in Howling Abyss, Seraphine is a very reliable champion. You can't really mess up as her. She has probably the best ult on Howling Abyss, maybe the best ult in the game, even in Summoner's Rift. These damage buffs will feel nice. Don't see any reason not to pick Seraphine, so I would suggest picking Seraphine if you want to win your matches. Skarner, Q slow duration and final bonus damage decreased, E cooldown decreased. Okay, so slow duration 1.25 to 1 second. That's not too bad. 10% targets maximum health to 8% targets maximum health. You probably won't really feel this too much unless you're against someone that is insanely tanky and builds a lot of health, such as Dr. Mundo or Cho'Gath. I think Skarner will probably remain the same. And then you have the E nerf, which is increased cooldown. I mean, they could triple this cooldown. No one is really using this often because there's no walls to play around as Skarner using this E. So I do not believe Skarner is going to be impacted too much. I think that he can definitely proc Aftershock, so you'll probably see Aftershock Skarner with the Unflinching build. Cho'Gath will probably destroy Skarner if Cho'Gath is in the game, though. And then we have Yorick. So this is just a monster damage cap. Yorick is going to remain the exact same because there's no monsters in Howling Abyss. So that's all I'm going to say about Yorick. Zed, E damage increase. So you have the base damage increase, and you also have, 15% bonus attack damage increase. So Zed is already buffed in ARAM, so he's going to absolutely shred the squishies that are nerfed, such as Ziggs, Xerath. These squishy mages, Vhagar I believe is also nerfed. These guys are going to get shredded by Zed-E. But will that make Zed win games? I don't really know. Zed's not very good in Howling Abyss simply because he does terribly into tanks, and also he can get hard countered by one item, that one item being Zhonya's. I think Zed will benefit this if the Zed player is good at Zed, but if you're an average Zed, I think Zed will remain the same. I think you would need to kind of experiment with him based off of your own skills, but I don't think he's a guaranteed win compared to other champions in the map. Okay, items. Staff of Flowing Water. Rapid AP buff duration increased from 4 seconds to 6 seconds. Buffs last long enough so they can be strong on many supports. So this is a good one because this is important for team comps that you have a lot of mages. Because let's say you give a heal to a Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz might not have his next ability up for over 4 seconds. But with 6 seconds, you can be a bit more flexible on whenever you time your heals, and then Vel'Koz or whatever mage you're buffing will be able to fully utilize that because they have more time to wait for the cooldowns because you have more increased duration of the AP buff. So I think this is a good healthy change. I don't think you would need to build Staff of Flowing Water every game, but still going to be healthy. I think this is a good buff. Tal Wildarrows. Practice makes lethal crit chance per stack 0.2% per stack, 0.4% to 0.2. Okay, so it's a buff to melee. I don't really know who would be building this item, with the exception of maybe Master Yi. I think this will be really good on Master Yi, but besides that, I have no idea who would be good building Tal Wildarrows. So, big buff to Yi. I don't think it'll be a bad item. I just don't see why anyone would build this. Maybe Jax. No, I could maybe picture a Jax build building this. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's going to be the same for range. Most range people will build it. Melee will need to take some experimentation before I feel confident in my opinion on this item. Axiom Arcanist. So single target has been nerfed by 2%. AoE has been nerfed by 1. I mean, it's ARAM. You're always going to be fighting. This is always going to be strong. Even if they nerf this to the ground, this is not going to be that big of a deal. I wouldn't be surprised if Axiom Arcanist is actually nerfed. I wonder if I could see that. I will check later and then put a note if it's nerfed or not. If you don't see anything on this screen, that means that I couldn't find anything or it's not nerfed in Howling Abyss. But still, this is a really strong rune. Everyone should still be taking it if you're going the sorcery tree. Unflinching, where I talked about, I think this is absolutely massive. You're basically guaranteed to proc it because Howling Abyss people will always manage to CC you. Still take this. This is huge buff. The only time I might say maybe not is if you go Revitalize and you have a lot of healing and shielders. But if you don't, take Unflinching. I think Unflinching will be insanely strong in Howling Abyss. Sixth Sense, this is more of a Summoner's Rift rune. I think only a Summoner's Rift rune, so I'm going to skip over this. We discussed the ARAM buffs. I think going AP/normal support Soraka is good. Tank Soraka is not good. Dark Harvest buff will feel nice. Sett cooldown will not make him irrelevant, but is a decent nerf. And I think that's it. I think all these items are for Swift Play and Arena. Okay, yeah, that looks like it's it. That's all we'll talk about for the ARAM buff. So I do want to do one thing. I want to talk about the champions that I think are going to be the strongest on this buff, or strongest that have been buffed on this patch. And that's definitely Cho'Gath. I think with the Unflinching and the fact that he deals so much true damage to the people that are probably going to be taking Unflinching, he's going to shred people. He's going to shred tanks with this extra % bonus damage. You're not going to build damage. I should have mentioned this earlier, but Q, you basically get no purpose leveling it up now. I put 1 point into it, obviously. But whenever you max it, you don't get any reduced cooldown. So you just get the base damage on it if you're going tank. And the base damage isn't really worth it. So definitely max Q last. I would say max E, max W, level up Q last. I think Cho'Gath is probably going to be one of the best champions on Howling Abyss. I definitely think he'll be the best tank in the Howling Abyss. I think the biggest loser of this patch is definitely Elise. I think Elise is atrocious in Howling Abyss. She either needs to be massively buffed on it, or they need to stop nerfing her. They're nerfing her because they don't like Elise support being a thing. So Elise is the biggest loser, Cho'Gath is the biggest winner. Thank you so much for watching, and as I stated at the start of this video, I do host ARAM tournaments, so if you want to sign up, I will link the Discord down in the description. We will be doing an arena tournament next, but ARAM tournaments will start again very soon, so come join us.